There's only one way for Daystar to be fixed, and that is a divine intervention from God. Because the human beings in charge right now have lost the plot. Yesterday, as we went through the memorial, I actually couldn't get through the whole thing. I had to, when I was pretty done when Jensen Franklin gave his eulogy.
Most institutions, when caught doing something wrong, at least try to look sorry. Daystar Television Network did not try. Not when they notified Jonathan Lamb that his mother was dead by sending the network's attorney to make the call. Not when they arranged his seating at her memorial service so that the cameras would not capture him. Not when they separated him from the closest friends he brought with him, redirecting them to a different section of the auditorium before the service had even started. Not when a pastor friend of his mother used the pulpit at her funeral to frame the allegations Jonathan had raised as the work of haters who would one day answer to God. And not when security personnel physically followed those friends out of the building when they could no longer remain seated inside it. Every single one of those things happened, publicly, documentably, on May 18, 2026, at Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas. And the people responsible for those decisions apparently saw nothing wrong with any of it. Today we are going through every detail of that afternoon. What happened, who was responsible, what it says about the culture of an institution that reaches more than 2 billion homes, and why it matters far beyond the grief of one family. What was built, and what broke. Daystar Television Network was founded in 1993 by Marcus and Joni Lamb. From a single Christian broadcasting station in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they built what Daystar's own website describes as the largest Christian broadcast network in the world, reaching more than 2 billion homes across more than 200 countries. Marcus Lamb died in November 2021 at 64 years old from COVID-19 complications. He had been vocal in his opposition to vaccine mandates, and his network had given considerable airtime to vaccine skeptics during the pandemic. His death was covered nati, only by NBC News, NPR, The New York Times, and The Washington Post. After Marcus died, Joni became sole president of the institution they had built together. Jonathan Lamb, their eldest child, the man Marcus had reportedly designated in a written directive as his successor after Joni, was serving as the network's vice president. That succession plan did not survive contact with what came next. In 2024, Jonathan and his wife Susie went public with allegations that their young daughter had been sexually abused by a male family member, a man identified across all reporting by the pseudonym Pete, who is Joshua Brown, the husband of Jonathan's sister Rachel, and a director of business development at Daystar. Brown categorically denied all allegations. Colleyville police investigated. In May 2025, they closed the case without filing charges, citing insufficient evidence and noting the child had not made a formal outcry. Police stated the case could reopen. Susie Lamb wrote publicly that the closure was procedural, not final. In November 2024, Jonathan was fired. Joni's public statement cited a 15-month performance review process and described the termination as a consequence of insubordination and failure to meet agreed standards. Jonathan disputed every element of that characterization. He said his firing was a direct result of his refusal to endorse Joni's marriage to Doug Weiss on air and his ongoing efforts to seek accountability for what he believed had been done to his daughter. The estrangement that followed was total. By the time Joni Lamb's health began failing visibly in early 2026, there was no channel of communication, no reconciliation, and no resolution. The call that never came. Joni Lamb died on May 7, 2026, at her home in Bedford, Texas. She was 65 years old, according to Wikipedia, which compiled its entry from multiple sources gathered after her death. The cause was complications of metastatic bone cancer. Daystar's public statements had referenced only a back injury and unspecified serious health matters. The cancer, if confirmed, had been kept entirely private. As she was dying, her eldest son was not called. Jonathan and Susie Lamb were, by Susie's own public account, close by, down the road, within easy reach. They were not contacted by his sisters. They were not contacted by Doug Weiss. They were not contacted by any family member as the situation became critical. Susie posted on X on the day of Joni's death. "We weren't informed of anything. We were down the road but weren't given a call to say goodbye." She added in a subsequent post, "They knew she was dying Wednesday evening and they didn't call Jonathan to come say goodbye." The person who did eventually contact Jonathan was Daystar attorney Tom Callender, not a sibling. Not a stepfather, not a family member or a pastor or a friend. A network attorney calling to inform Jonathan that his mother was already gone. That is not an accident. That is a sequence of choices made by people who decided that managing institutional optics mattered more than allowing a son to say goodbye to his mother. And those choices set the tone for everything that happened 11 days later. The venue. Already a statement. The choice of Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas as the memorial venue generated immediate and significant reaction from people following both the Daystar story and the parallel situation at Gateway itself. Gateway was founded by Robert Morris, a megachurch pastor who, in June 2024, resigned following public accusations from Cindy Kleeser, who alleged Morris had sexually abused her over a period of years beginning when she was 12 years old. In October 2025, Morris pleaded guilty to 5 counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail and nearly 10 years of probation, served his sentence, and was released in late March 2026, approximately 6 weeks before Joni Lamb died. The day after Joni's death, a Tarrant County judge signed an order dismissing a civil lawsuit between Gateway Church and Morris over a multi-million-dollar retirement dispute. The church had alleged Morris had demanded $1 million and a retirement package worth hundreds of thousands annually for the rest of his and his wife's lives. The choice to hold the memorial at this specific building, in this specific week, placed the Daystar farewell at the direct intersection of 2 of the most significant child protection accountability conversations happening in evangelical Christianity. Defenders of the choice noted Gateway's new leadership, its capacity for large gatherings, and Rachel Lamb Brown's ongoing attendance there. The symbolism was noted regardless. The service, and who was given a microphone. The lineup of speakers was genuinely extraordinary by any measure. President Donald Trump delivered a pre-recorded message from the Oval Office. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a video tribute. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. offered remarks thanking Joni and Marcus for giving him a platform during the pandemic. Joel Osteen honored her. Paula White Cain spoke of decades of friendship. Samuel Rodriguez, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, and others contributed. Doug Weiss, Joni's husband, delivered his remarks by pre-recorded video, explaining on camera that the production team had asked him to record in advance because they knew he would cry. He spoke of holding Joni's hand on the beach, whitewater rafting, biking, meeting presidents together, a commitment to staying what he called lovers for life. Rachel and Rebecca, Joni's daughters, both spoke live on stage. Rachel described her mother covering her during the hardest season of her life, walking with her, praying with her, holding her together when everything was falling apart. Rebecca held a devotional Joni had personally signed and spoke about a final Mother's Day lesson her mother had recorded about surrender to God. Both women were deeply emotional. The grief in their words was clearly genuine. Neither of them mentioned that their brother was in the room. The corner, the camera, the design. Jonathan Lamb attended. He and Susie came to say goodbye to his mother. They brought support. Kenyon Coleman, a former Dallas Cowboys defensive end, and his wife Katie. The Colemans had known Susie since 2019. They had been present through some of the most difficult periods of the past 2 years. They were not casual acquaintances. They were the kind of friends people call when everything is collapsing. Jonathan and Susie had invited the Colemans to sit with them. Shortly before the service began, Jonathan and Susie sent a text. The Colemans would not be permitted to sit with them. They were being redirected to a completely different section of the auditorium. At a funeral, for a close friend's mother. They were separated by institutional design before the first word had been spoken from the pulpit. Jonathan was seated in the front row on the far right of the auditorium. According to the Roy's Report's detailed coverage of the service, he was positioned away from the family members on the platform and away from the cameras capturing the service. He was the only child of Joni Lamb who did not speak from that stage. He was not acknowledged by his sisters. He was not given a microphone. He sat and watched the eulogy and what it did. Jentizen Franklin is the senior pastor of Free Chapel in Gainesville, Georgia, and one of the most recognizable evangelical broadcasters in America. He and the Lambs had known each other for decades. He carried real institutional weight in that room, and the room knew it. He opened by acknowledging all 3 children. He said directly, according to the published transcript of the service, "I want to say to Rebecca, and I want to say to Rachel, and I want to say to Jonathan, we love you." And that. And he turned. He called Joni a velvet brick. He described her strength and her loyalty. He spoke of her commitment to the gospel, and then, according to the published transcript, words he said the Lord had told him to preach at this funeral, he said the following: "To criticize is the smallest size, especially when somebody's touching the world, especially when somebody's preaching Jesus in the city, Jesus in the streets, Jesus to the nations. Who do we think we are? At some point we will give an account of every idle word." He said she had dealt with criticism, and then added, "Always there will be haters." No names were used. None needed to be. The Sun, whose public allegations had driven 2 years of investigative coverage. The Sun, who had been fired 18 months earlier. The Sun, who had just been separated from his friends by the seating arrangements. The Sun, who was not given a microphone. That Sun was seated in a pew to the far right of the auditorium, listening to a pastor his mother had known for decades tell the assembled crowd that her critics were haters who would answer to God for their idle words. The walkout and the security detail. At some point during Franklin's message, Kenyon and Katie Coleman stood up and left. When they did, according to the Roy's Report's coverage of their account, security personnel followed them out of the building. They were followed out of a church, at a funeral, for leaving during a sermon. Jonathan and Susie also learned that day that they had not been invited to Joni's burial, not to the graveside, not to the private final farewell. After the service, Katie Coleman posted to Instagram. The Roy's Report documented the full text. She wrote, "I've never seen a man and his family more disrespected than what I witnessed today in the house of God. Shame on you, Gentizen, Rachel Brown, and Daystar. You stood on that platform not to truthfully honor the dead or comfort the living, but to stir the pot in a moment that should have been marked by dignity, grief, and respect. No communication about his mother's death, no invitation or information about her burial. What happened today was dishonorable and deplorable. You will all stand before God for this day. We love you, JL and S. So proud of you guys." That post named Franklin directly. It named Rachel Lamb Brown. It named Daystar. And it described what had taken place inside that building not as a memorial service but as something that had abandoned its own stated purpose entirely. The one acknowledgement that came from outside. In one of the more remarkable details of the entire service, the most direct and personal acknowledgement that Jonathan Lamb received did not come from the platform where his siblings stood. It came from a pre-recorded message filmed in the Oval Office. President Donald Trump, in his tribute, addressed the entire Lamb family by name, Joni's husband Doug and her children Rachel, Rebecca, and Jonathan, and told them that Joni was looking down on all of them right now, filled with love and joy. The sitting president of the United States named Jonathan Lamb with warmth and inclusion. His own sisters, standing at the microphone in the same building, did not. What this reveals, and what it demands. The Daystar story is not simply about financial records and flight logs and expense reports and legal filings, though all of those documents matter and all of them deserve scrutiny. It is about institutional culture, about the choices a powerful organization makes when no one is watching, and the choices it makes when everyone is watching, apparently unconcerned about what those choices reveal. The same impulse that led to Jonathan being notified of his mother's death by the network's attorney showed up in the seating chart at that service. The same impulse that kept the cancer diagnosis private from the viewers who had financially supported the ministry for decades showed up in the eulogy that reframed accountability concerns as the work of haters. The same culture that produced the financial controversies produced the decision to have security follow grieving friends out of a funeral. These are not separate events. They are the same institution, operating according to the same internal logic, making the same kind of choices it has consistently made, and making them without apparent concern for what it looks like to the millions of donors and viewers and ministry partners still connected to it. The succession question remains unanswered. No individual has been publicly named as the new president. The board's statement referred to a leadership team without identifying anyone. Doug Weiss's ongoing formal role has not been clarified. The financial governance structure that shields Daystar from standard nonprofit transparency still exists. The abuse investigation remains closed, but not permanently. All of those threads remain open, and the institution responsible for what happened on May 18th has not addressed any of them publicly. What happened at Gateway Church on May 18th, 2026 will be part of the documented record of this story for a long time. Not for the presidential tribute, not for the daughter's tears or the rabbi's blessing, but for the son in the corner of the room, separated from his friends, given no microphone, excluded from his mother's burial, and rebuked from the pulpit, who came anyway. I want to know what you think. What does this moment say about the institution Daystar Television Network actually is, beneath the mission statements and the broadcast reach and the world leaders paying tribute? And what does accountability genuinely require from the people watching from the outside? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is a real conversation, and the community here takes it seriously. If you are not subscribed, now is the time. Notifications on. The Daystar succession story is still developing. The estate questions, the governance questions, the leadership announcements, and when those chapters arrive, you will want the sourced account. Thank you for watching. Stay discerning.